All right, so we all love the idea of amusement parks, right? We get adrenaline from the ride, we're laughing, it's a place of joy, the perfect place to have a good, fun day. But in talking about amusement parks today, we're going to go a completely different route. We're going to be delving into the darker side of amusement parks. We're going to be talking about the incidents and the accidents that have shaken the very foundation of these places that we know for fun and laughter. So buckle up so we can explore the amusement park incident iceberg. But before we dive in, just a quick reminder to go ahead and hit the subscribe button, comment, engage, because it really does help me out. And you can always undo it, it's completely free. So it really does go a long way to help me out. Besides that, let's get right into it. Thank you for tuning in. So, starting right off with tier number one, we have unrelated medical deaths. So, unrelated on ride medical deaths, what does this exactly mean? So, these are things that have pretty much nothing to do exactly with the ride itself. These are incidents when the rider usually experiences some kind of like medical emergency, usually from some kind of pre existing condition. These are either known conditions or unknown conditions, but this is when like someone has a heart attack on the ride and they already had, several heart attacks before, or some other known or unknown condition leads to their death tragically on a roller coaster ride. Here's an example that might hit close to home. Back in 2006 at the Magic Kingdom, there was a 6-year-old who had tragically passed away on Space Mountain. He was a terminally ill cancer patient, and during his ride, he happened to lose consciousness. And soon after, he passed away. The autopsy and the coroner's report later concluded that this was completely from natural causes due to the terminal cancer. And it's definitely just a really heavy thing that does happen at amusement parks. Another one that's very surreal is one of a 22-year-old woman in 2014 on the ride It's a Small World, the one that we all know for the catchy little tune, had passed away from a stroke unexpectedly. She did have pre-existing conditions, and it definitely does just confirm the fear that at any moment anything can happen, and sometimes it does happen even at an amusement park. The next incident in tier one is the Apollo's Chariot Fabio incident. So the Italian-born supermodel Fabio Lanzoni was a super notable figure in the 80s and 90s. He was on TV, he was in movies, he was all over the covers of romance novels. He's like always illustrated into those romance novel covers. In 1999, Fabio decided to take the inaugural opening ride at Busch Gardens. And this is like a super routine thing. I guess like celebrities do this kind of stuff. And that's what he expected. He expected a routine grand opening kind of thing. So Fabio gets on the ride and keep in mind this ride gets up to 70 miles an hour. While he's on the ride, he collided with a goose that was flying by and it struck him in the face. And this created obviously a super gruesome scene. There's footage of this, not the impact, but there's footage of Fabio leaving and Fabio coming back, arriving back at the beginning of the ride, covered in blood and goose. And the goose carcass struck Fabio in the face and it left him with a cut that he ended up having to get 3 stitches. The initial, I saw a lot of people saying that I saw a lot of people saying that the blood on Fabio's face was from the goose, which is a common misconception. It's been confirmed by Fabio that the blood on his face in the video is his blood from the cut that he got from the impact of the goose hitting him at 70 miles an hour. And that brings us to the end of tier one. Pretty short. Let's go ahead and get into tier two. The first one on tier two, mission space deaths at Epcot in Walt Disney World. So this ride utilizes a unique system of capsules that rotate. The riders will sit in these capsules and spin, and this is supposed to simulate the G-forces of a launching spaceship. Currently, the ride operates with a much less intense version. Now it's essentially just a motion simulator that doesn't involve spinning. From June 2004 to June 2005, paramedics treated 194 mission space riders. So many people reported having issues with this ride. dizziness, and some people even experience much more severe complaints like chest pain, irregular heartbeat arrhythmia, and the gravity of the situation took a much more tragic turn when a 4-year-old boy suffered a fatal heart attack on the ride. And then just shortly after that, a 49-year-old woman also suffered a heart attack shortly after. These incidents set the reputation of this ride as being too dangerous. Up next, we have the Richard Petty driving experience death. Now, a tragic incident at Walt Disney World Speedway involving the Richard Petty driving experience in Orlando. During a ride with a 24-year-old participant, a 36-year-old driving instructor whose name was Gary Terry lost his life tragically when he was driving a Lamborghini Gallardo. Florida Highway Patrol later reported that the driver failed to maneuver the Lamborghini through the course, and this led to a super high speed collision with a crash barrier. While the driver suffered minor injuries, the instructor Gary was killed upon impact. In an official statement from Petty Holdings, they had expressed their grievances for their loss of Terry, a senior operations manager, and a driving instructor. As of now, the Richard Petty driving experience no longer offers the opportunity for customers to drive any exotic cars. Up next in Tier 2, we have Python Original Slogan. So this is a pretty unsettling story of the Python roller coaster at Busch Gardens in Tampa, Florida. So the Python was originally marketed with the slogan, "I challenge the Python and live." This tagline was all over shirts that park visitors could purchase themselves. They had it on hats and mugs, keychains. So this ended up turning into a pretty dark narrative when a 39-year-old individual grappling with a heart condition tragically lost their life on the roller coaster. And of course, in response to this, the park pulled all of the merchandise with this tagline slogan. And I mean, yeah, I completely understand that one. Once someone dies on your ride, I don't think you can, in good taste, use the slogan, "I rode this and survived," unless, I don't know. I I understand why they removed all the merchandise. Up next in tier two, we have the Walt Disney World bus incidents. So, a 9-year-old boy named Chase Brubaker of St. Petersburg lost his life in a collision with a Walt Disney World bus while he was riding his bike on the park's property. This incident happened near the Fort Wilderness area of the park, where the boy's bicycle veered off the sidewalk and in front of the bus. Both Chase and the other little girl that he was with were both wearing helmets, but he hit the bus in a way where he was brought underneath and went under the rear right tire of the bus. The bus was carrying 28 people who did remain unharmed. To this day, no charges have been filed against Disney, and it's allegedly still being investigated to this day. And this is an unfortunate part of a series of events that have happened at Disney, and I do think I want to do at some point an entire video just on like all the deaths and accidents that Disney is involved with, or maybe even some other parks in specific that deserve like because there's some parks that have a whole bunch of stuff at them. Disney in particular is one of those parks. In another one at Walt Disney World, a 69-year-old tourist by the name of Robert Kruger. He was from Yarmouthport, Massachusetts. He had lost his life after stepping in front of a Walt Disney World bus. This one actually happened in the parking lot at the resort. He later passed away at the Orlando Regional Medical Center, and police are still investigating this one to this day, so no charges were filed against Disney. And on to tier number three. First item on the list for tier three is Terminal Velocity No Net. And this one involves the Terminal Velocity ride at Extreme World in Wisconsin Dells. This one's described as a free fall ride. It involves lifting the rider to the top of the platform, unhooking them from the cable, and allowing them to free fall before being caught in the net. However, in 2010, a 12-year-old girl experienced probably the most terrifying thing that I could possibly imagine, a 100-foot free fall straight onto concrete when the ride operator completely failed to pull out the net before unhooking her at the top of the ride. 100 feet onto straight concrete for a 12-year-old girl. Miraculously, she survived somehow. This girl suffered 10 fractures in her back and one fracture of the skull. And this brings to mind, I can only imagine, obviously, the kind of person that would forget to put up the safety net. It's like an integral part of the ride. It's like half of the ride or 90% of the ride is putting up the net. The fact that the net's even retractable is like ridiculous. And it should always be there. I don't know. This one just really makes me think about how I don't trust anyone with my life or my safety when I hear about stuff like this. The next one on tier three is Action Park. So this is an amusement park and water park in Vernon Township, New Jersey. This one's known for a combination of super poorly designed rides and very often inebriated teenage employees. This park has a massive reputation for injuries and deaths and accidents throughout the course of its history. One of the most tragic incidents that I could find in relation to Action Park revolves around the death of one George Larson. George Larson was a 19-year-old who met a tragic fate after riding the Alpine Slide. This ride consisted of a 2,700 foot long track made out of concrete, fiberglass, and asbestos. It also featured small sleds equipped with an accelerator and a brake. And unfortunately, the brakes and the accelerator were known to be broken more often than not. This is brought up in a documentary about the park called Class Action Park, which I do highly recommend everyone watch. There's a lot of stuff on YouTube about this place, and I do recommend everyone go try to learn about this place because it's pretty nuts. So, one afternoon, Larson went aboard this ride, and his sled had a broken brake. Not being able to brake made his sled veer off track. He fell into an embankment and he hit his head on a rock. Because of the trauma he suffered from the impact, he went into a coma and he eventually passed away from it. And what's super upsetting about this one is how quickly the founder of the park in the media jumped to kind of downplay the severity of this incident, try to cover up what really happened. They completely lied and said that Larson was an employee at the park. They said that he was riding at night. They said that he was riding in the rain when he shouldn't have been. And all of these claims are highly disputed by his family. And this is one of the many events that sheds the light on the hazardous conditions of this park. State records between 1984 and 1985 alone show that 14 fractures, 26 head injuries, and several other minor injuries are attributed to the Alpine Slide at Action Park. And if anyone's interested in further exploring Action Park, there's an HBO documentary that I highly recommend that takes like a super comprehensive look into the disturbing legacy behind Action Park. And then I think Defunct Land here on YouTube has a really good video about it. So I do recommend you watch it. I'll link it down below. Up next, we have Superman amputation. In a horrifying incident at Kentucky Kingdom in 2007, a malfunction on the Superman Tower of Power, which is a drop kind of ride, resulted in a cable snapping and severing the feet of a 13-year-old girl. This malfunction occurred at approximately 4:45 p.m., and this injury obviously led to the complete amputation of the girl's feet. Witnesses also reported that when the cable snapped during the ride, the cable impacted multiple passengers. This ride was formerly known as the Hellevator, which is an insane name. Takes people up 177 feet and they completely free fall once they get to the top, 154 feet, reaching speeds of 54 miles an hour. In this incident, the cable snapped as they were on the way up. The girl was rushed to the university hospital. They were able to reattach her right foot because it was completely cut off cleanly, but the left foot was more mangled and ripped off. That's disgusting. But they were not able to reattach it because of that. And so they just had to completely amputate it. So Six Flags Kentucky Kingdom completely shut down the park for the day. Up next, we have Body Wars Death. So this was a tragic accident at Epcot's Wonders of Life Pavilion. Body Wars is a motion simulator type of ride. In 1995, a 4-year-old girl named Linda Edwin Baker with a pre-existing heart condition lost consciousness on the ride and later passed away in the hospital. This one was one of the first high profile cases of its kind, and this is pretty much the main reason that the Body Wars attraction is completely closed down. When Linda Elaine Baker lost consciousness on the ride, she immediately slumped over. One of the cast members immediately saw this and went into action to see what she could do. They called, cast member had called over for two nurses, and they immediately started performing CPR. She was airlifted to the Orlando Regional Medical Center, but was pronounced dead immediately upon arriving to the medical center. And in the autopsy, they couldn't completely conclude exactly why Linda fell unconscious on the ride, but later autopsy samples had suggested a congenital heart condition. It was called cardiac conduction defect. From what I read about this, it essentially just relates to the electrical signals of the heart not being sent. And according to the autopsy evidence, there's no indication that the ride specifically worsened this condition. The family members initially reported that she had no pre existing conditions, but later it retracted that, and they released the information that she was under treatment at the University of Texas Medical Branch in Galveston, and it was never disclosed why they withheld that information. Up next, we have Fujin Raijin. In 2007, tragedy struck at Expo Land in Osaka, Japan, with the Fujin Raijin stand-up roller coaster. A broken axle led to the derailment of the ride, and this resulted in the death of a 19-year-old university student, as well as injuries to 40 other people. And despite this incident, the roller coaster seems to still be in operation. A lot of this is attributed to the poor design of the ride, whose manufacturer is no longer in operation. Supposedly, a wheel on the second car had locked up, and this broke the axle. And based on reports, this wheel and axle had not been inspected or replaced in over a year. I'm not sure if that's a regular amount of time for a wheel and axle on a roller coaster to be replaced, but I hope everything's being replaced and monitored very frequently, because they operate like all day, every day, right? Oh, actually, I lied. It says right here that it had not been replaced since March of 1992, which is insane. That's like way too long for anything, on anything to be ever replaced. Apparently, this was such a big thing that even other similar rides in Japan at the time decided to close down. I'm assuming so that when something like that happens, I imagine all the other amusement parks are like, okay, yeah, we definitely need to do some inspection. Moving on to Tier 4 with the America Sings accident. On July 8th, 1974, a tragic accident occurred at Disneyland's America Sings attraction. This resulted in the death of an 18-year-old Deborah Gale Stone. She was a hostess at the attraction and was welcoming guests over the microphone at the time. She got too close to an area of the ride that was in between a rotating section of the stage and a non-rotating part of the theater. And she was a pretty small girl, standing at around 5'2", and when she was pinned into this space, she was ultimately crushed to death. This obviously led to the temporary closure of the America Sings attraction, but they only closed it down for 2 days, which I don't know anything about how amusement parks operate under these kinds of situations, but I feel like that's just not long enough. As a preventative measure, they obviously fixed the dangerous parts of this. They made all the walls super collapsible. They introduced like safety guardrails. They did training, I assume, for the hostesses of this ride. It says online that they took a bunch of safety measures to make sure that this doesn't happen again. Up next, we have the Walt Disney World monorail crash. This one took place on July 5th, 2009, also at Walt Disney World, Florida. This involved two different monorails, the pink and the purple. At about 1:30 a.m., the pink monorail was carrying only the pilot, and they were finishing their operations for one of the busiest days of the year. And following behind them was another monorail pilot for purple with the pilot and 6 passengers. The transportation and ticket center, which has been there since the opening of the park in 1971, at that part. The monorail pink was ordered to switch rails at the Ticket and Transportation Center. Allegedly, someone in charge of transferring the the pink monorail from one track to another in order to head back to the Magic Kingdom from the resort was not paying attention, and this led the pilot to assume that the transfer was already complete. At one point, as Monorail Pink began to reverse, it happened too quickly so that the collision was pretty much inevitable. The pilot of Monorail Purple, seeing what was happening, attempted to put his monorail into reverse in order to do his best to avoid the incident, but ultimately, there wasn't enough time. Fortunately, the passengers were not injured, but the pilot of Monorail Purple was killed in this accident. Fortunately, also, Disney employees at the time also jumped to action immediately, doing what they could to evacuate the passengers on the monorail. And obviously, the entire driver's cab section of the Purple Monorail was completely destroyed. And yeah, this is just another case of, things that can go super wrong when people aren't paying attention to their job. When little things like pushing a button or switching a lever are so completely detrimental, so completely essential to people's safety, I think it's really important. And that kind of stuff is scary because, like I said, you never know who you're trusting with your life. Up next, we have the Mind Bender. This one took place in 1986 on the Mind Bender roller coaster. This is the looping roller coaster inside of Galaxyland Amusement Park in West Edmonton Mall, Alberta, Canada. On the evening of June 14th, the fourth car completely derailed midway along the course, right before it reached the top of the third loop. When the wheel assembly came off of the fourth car, this caused the car to sway back and forth across the rails, and this somehow triggered the lap belt restraints on the ride to release. And so they're heading up to the loop, and all the lap bar locks release, and this dumps all the passengers onto the concrete floor down below. Then the roller coaster continued down the rail until on the next loop it completely detached and crashed into a concrete pillar that was adjacent to the ride. 3 of the 4 passengers that were in the car lost their lives, and the 4th person that was ejected still suffered life-threatening injuries that completely changed the course of their life. And there were other passengers who were not ejected that also sustained non-permanent injuries. There was an investigation done into the cause as to why the train derailed and what happened that day, and allegedly it's because some of the screw caps were loose. It was also theorized that these screw caps were loose just because of faulty manufacturing that meant that they would loosen faster than the maintenance routine suggested, and that they were also not routinely maintained on time. This ride again reopened a year later in 1987, and they did make efforts to implement new safety regulations and maintenance and inspection. In addition to the lap belt secures, there was also straps added. They added head shoulder rests to and shoulder restraints, and I think that's the least they can do for the passenger safety, especially with what happened. Next up is the Smiler accident. In 2015, Smiler is on a mind control themed roller coaster ride at Alton Towers in Staffordshire, United Kingdom. The ride suffered a serious accident when a train carrying riders collided with an unloaded test cart that was stuck on the track. And this only happened because engineers overrode a safety precaution, and when they overrode this test stop, the safety feature, they unknowingly stalled the train car. Doing this meant that the train cars that were continuing behind them were left to catch up. This resulted in several very serious injuries, including a leg amputation. And while there are no reported casualties with this specific accident, witnesses to this day mark the terror of this malfunction. So this entire crash was captured on CCTV footage. So there's for sure video of this somewhere that someone has. I didn't see it. I honestly didn't even look for it. I don't want to see that. And despite all of this, the Smiler is still in operation to this day. Next is the Matterhorn bobsled death. The Matterhorn bobsled at Disney has been marked by 2 tragic deaths. The first one occurred in 1967 and the second one in 1984. In both times, these accidents occurred because the guests undid their safety restraints. The second one is particularly gruesome because this one actually resulted in a decapitation of the victim of the ride. They removed their safety restraints, fell out of the train, and then as they were falling out, they were hit by an oncoming opposing train. And I think that the existence of all these accidents and the Matterhorn accident included, I think, is a super important reminder for the safety of these kinds of things to just follow the rules. Don't take off your safety restraints and stuff. But I think that's it for this video. I'm gonna have to wrap it up here, and then I'm gonna do the next two tiers is gonna be their own entire video for themselves. But yeah, other than that, if there's anything in this list that you think I should cover, or if you want me to cover, I can go ahead and add it to the next video. So go ahead and comment down below. Let me know what you guys think. Um, that being said, I really do, again, appreciate you guys checking out the video, engaging and commenting and liking. It does help me out a lot. I'm going to link my personal socials down below too. If you guys want to hit me up or chop it over, give me a follow. You don't have to, but if you want to. Other than that, this tier list is like super fascinating. It's definitely depressing the longer that we get into it. Like, I don't know if you noticed, I had a costume change just because filming the first half of this video was like, I don't know, it definitely makes me feel bad and not good. It's super existential because it's like supposed to be a fun topic, but I don't know, maybe I just don't have the stomach for this topic. But if you stay this long, I super hella appreciate it. And I hope you guys all have a good night.